Hi, my name's Kevin Hicks. Welcome to the History Squad. Now today we're out on location, one of my favourite shooting spots, the sandpit here. This is great for me because there's a bit of a safety zone around it. Now I've brought out the beast. This was gifted to me by a chap called Dave Roberts many years ago down near Southampton. This is a windlass crossbow, a heavyweight crossbow. If I remember correctly, it was over 700 pound draw weight, and I hate it. In fact, when I was at Warwick, I first shot this for Dave because he hated it too. It's a beast. But if you go back into the medieval times, the crossbowmen were quite something. I'm actually dressed as a crossbowman in the service of the King of France. It's very difficult for me as an Englishman to actually do this. But what I wanted to show you was, first of all, the crossbow. So let's have a look. I was always warned by Dave, never fire this, or never shoot it, should I say, unless you're wearing a helmet. And I says, why? He said, well, if that snaps, it'll come round and crush your head. That's how dangerous these things can be. So I've got a helmet, but I'm not wearing this at the moment. I'm going to put it down and bring this into view. Right, it's fitted with the windlass. The windlass, you wind, put your foot in the stirrup down below there, and you wind him up. As you're winding it up, you must ensure you hit the back of the trigger, push the nut forward, and then it will engage. But I'm not going to do that until I'm ready to shoot. As I say, this whole thing, when it's loaded up, there's hundreds upon hundreds of pounds draw weight. And if you want the truth, I don't like it. I'd rather shoot a rocket than shoot this. But I'm doing it specially for you. So I'm going to unhook the windlass. I'll bring him down. Clip off the hooks, which in itself is awkward. It's not easy. Yeah, there's one. There we go. Right, so that's under. Now once this is off, it's in danger of getting tangled up, so I'd hand it to my reloader or to my paviseur. I'll explain about the other guys in a minute. So I'm just going to very gently lay it down, try not to tangle it up, so that I can show you the crossbow itself. Here it is without the winding mechanism. This is a heavyweight, late medieval crossbow. It has a steel bow. Before then, they weren't steel. They were some of them were composite, a mixture of leather, wood, and horn. Then before then, they were wood until going all the way back to the Chinese. Apparently, they had great big bows of wood, and this one, it's a killer without a doubt. Right now, the wooden prod, as you can see, it's really heavy. I'm not sure what this one is. I think it's oak, if you want the truth. You have a groove here which is often waxed where the bolt actually sits. Bolt in English, quarrel in French, and we actually say go pick a quarrel. So your bowstring, I'm not sure because I've never replaced this one, but there's probably over 100 yards of triple thread in this. And this is the nut. When it's loading, it's put there, the string passes over it, and it locks. The trigger now, or the lever, is there just to release it. The bow itself is held in with these steel wedges to brace the whole thing. And if you look, it's marked just here in front of the stirrup to make sure you've got it right. These have to be regularly checked. This one's a heavy steel one. The stirrup itself means that you can actually put the crossbow down, put your foot into it, and steady it. You then put all of the winding mechanism on, wind him up, click, and then you can shoot him. If you look at it the other way, all this is a simple lever that's on a V-spring. As you pull him in, the nut releases. When you push him out, it actually locks. So it is a very crude trigger. These are difficult to shoot. They're not straightforward. They're not a light crossbow that you can shoot from a horse. These, well, if you want to be one of these crossbowmen, you've got to be a member of a team. Now I'm wearing the French colours. Difficult for me, I know, being an Englishman. But the French had lots of crossbowmen, and it was the French who hired the Genoese crossbowmen, and the Genoese have to be the most famous crossbowmen of all time in the West. Now, because this beast, as I keep calling it, of a crossbow is so heavy and hard to use, you have to have a bit of protection on the battlefield. Voila, this is a Pavise, or should I say it's Kevin. He's made a model of a Pavise. This is 1/2 inch wood. It's got a central spine that allows you to have a wooden stake, which I've hammered into the ground. They were quite beautiful when they were decorated. I've just done this in the fleur de lis of France. So the way it works with a Pavise, fair enough, if you've got a little crossbow or a smaller crossbow, you can carry your Pavise on your back. When you're reloading, you can turn around, offer your back to the enemy. Hey, that's pretty neat, isn't it? If you've got the great big crossbow, as I've got, and then the enormous Pavise, you operate in a team of 3, and this is what the Genoese crossbowmen were specialists at. The Pavise, Paviseur, you got this guy who hammers the stake in, steadies the Pavise. He has a spear, so he is there also to defend you. Then you have your reloader, who will have your second crossbow. You will then take a shot, having loaded. You then turn, you're handed a loaded crossbow, bang. Another crossbow, bang. You are continually shooting loaded crossbows. If you're tired, if you're injured, you take over the loading, the loader comes and he shoots. But if you have 5,000 of these crossbowmen with these Pavise, and they are trained, and they know how to use them, you can advance to contact, as we used to say in the British Army. You move towards the enemy, you advance to contact. These guys have got the Pavise to stand behind, to kneel behind, to reload in comparative safety. But once this is loaded, it has a little nook in it there. Now I've got to be careful. I would have to hammer that in a bit more. But this would enable me, oh gosh, yeah, it really does make a stable platform. Oh wow, it really does stabilize it. That is quite something. Yeah, easier than standing holding it, I can tell you. Right, so this is the first time I'll have ever shot behind a Pavise. So I'm going to load here so you can see it. My foot's in, and I can tell you now, you kind of feel the whole thing bracing up, and you really do have to watch as you're winding everything up that it doesn't tangle. As it goes over the nut should lock. Got it. Now don't forget, my Paviseur would now be reloading. I'm stepping in, knocking him on. There's that little groove. There's my target over there. Let's have a see how she goes. Put a bolt on it. I mean, see if we can hit it. The wind's blowing it. It's amazing how the Pavise changes the whole business of shooting a heavyweight crossbow. First of all, it's stable. As I got down behind it, I felt as if I could hold it like a machine gun. And to my surprise, I was above the target. On close range, I'm about 30, 40 yards. I think you need to be 100 yards away to be able to shoot this, and I can't do that at the moment here. We'll have a look later on, see what I can figure out. But it really does open your eyes. Those crossbowmen of old with their Pavise, they really knew what they were doing. And you've got to look at the Genoese, see how they trained, how they formed their corps, to understand how the heavyweight crossbowman worked. So when you take the Genoese crossbowmen, this professional corps of crossbowmen. The First Crusade, they proved themselves incredible. The Siege of Jerusalem. The Third Crusade, Jaffa, that was 1192. Now the way these guys worked, they had their pavise, their paviseur, their reloader, but they advanced to contact, as I mentioned. One lot moved forward, then another lot leapfrog until eventually that close to the enemy, they can just charge. They were not just crossbowmen, they were heavy assault troops, and that's quite something. Also, they were all trained in Genoa, in northern Italy. In fact, most of their recruits came from that area. Parva, Corsica, Milan, all around there. In fact, I don't think they did come from Milan. I think the Milanese had their own crossbowmen. Oh my goodness me, could there be a little bit of argy-bargy there? Now, as their reputation grew as mercenary corps that could be hired out, in Europe it was said if you capture a Genoese crossbowman from the other side, cut his fingers off so he can't shoot at us again. Ooh, I've heard that before. Cut their fingers off. Isn't that Agincourt? And the French are saying they're going to cut off the English bowman's fingers. Well, kind of resonates a little bit with me. So, leaving the Genoese, who by the way continued on to fight up into the 16th century, the crossbowmen, every castle in England, Scotland, Ireland, Wales, all throughout Christendom over into the Middle East had crossbows. The crossbows are fantastic to shoot through the crossbow slits, through the arrow slits. I've done many of them. At the Siege of Lincoln, the crossbow was king. And at Dover Castle, just round to the side, I did a documentary years ago where I shot through the specially made crossbow tower. And that was brilliant because you got 3 apertures and 3 crossbowmen could shoot out of this one slit. There are different angles and it's most amazing. And of course, if you're laying siege to the castle, you have your pavise or you have your trenches and all that, and you can take your time and shoot at the castle accurately with your crossbows. One of my favourite crossbow pieces from a book, Bernard Cornwell, where you have the blackbird shooting down from the castle. And it does reflect that everybody knew about crossbows in England, knew how to use them. Come the War of the Roses, you have the Paston family out in Norfolk, the wife writes to the husband who's in London on business, when you come back, fetch back some crossbows. I'm having trouble with the neighbours. You can read those papers and read about the crossbows. So in England, medieval periods coming towards an end, we have the Wars of the Roses. Lots of crossbowmen fighting in those different battles. It's often overlooked in English history. You know, the longbowmen now, the king. But in fact, without the crossbow, you couldn't defend a castle. You couldn't lay siege to a castle. In fact, the crossbow to me is as important as the longbow. It just depends how and where you use it. So for me, this is difficult. By the time I've hooked it up, wound him on and locked the nut and the string together, I reckon I've taken about a minute. And then I've got to undo the windlass, put on a crossbow bolt and take aim and shoot. So for Kevin, about a minute and a half. But you're professionals. They were doing it as a team. And if you were behind a castle wall, you can have a loaded crossbow just standing by. You can be helping each other and it will take far less. But you imagine going back to those Genoese, 2 men, 1 loading, 1 shooting. You'd need a barrel full of crossbow bolts. And there's just an interesting thing I found out when I was working at Warwick Castle. Crossbow bolts are kept by their thousands down in the cellars. And they have a man or a boy whose job it is to open up the cupboards and the barrels and the boxes and turn the crossbow bolts. Make sure they don't get damp, make sure they don't get wet. So it's more to this being a crossbowman than meets the eye. Complicated equipment, good crossbow bolts. I do know that a crossbowman would have his own sheath, 24 crossbow bolts, but he will have shot dozens of others and discarded them. No good. And I actually do that. I shoot a dozen crossbow bolts. If they stick in the target, great. If they miss, it's the bolt. It's got nothing to do with me. Well, I hope you enjoyed that video. It's a little bit windy out here, but if you did enjoy, like, share and subscribe. And if you'd like to support the channel further, why not have a look at joining our Patreon community? We do have some fun. And before I go any further, it's written down in front of me, I have a shout out for some of our Patreon members: Dan DeCenso, Martin Hans, and how about this one, King Henry Bucklerk. Hey guys, thanks a million. Bye for now.